Andy McPhail spoke today. I found some very interesting things in there. Ryan Lawrence will join us here from the Philly Voice, taking a look at the Phils this offseason and some of the interesting storylines. They're jumping right into this thing with the managerial search. They haven't had one of these for some time, really, since Charlie Manuel, I guess, right? Was the last time they had a legitimate managerial search. What year was that? Back in, '05, '06, something like that?
Yeah, that's even predates me, and this is my 10th year covering the team. So, yeah, it was, before '06, I think? Yeah, I think that's right. Or before '05, one of those 2 years.
It was, I think it was '05.
They went into the new ballpark with Boa as the manager, but I can't remember if his last year was the first or second year at the ballpark.
Well, it's been a while. And with that being said, the last time they were looking for kind of a veteran guy to take a team over the top. I mean, they were pushing. They needed someone to kind of get them to the next step. So they brought in a veteran guy like Charlie who had won in Cleveland. What are they looking for this time?
I think they're looking for someone younger. I think they're looking for someone more progressive, I think is the best word. Someone that, won't always manage by the book. That's hard to find in baseball because most baseball people are old school baseball people, and that's the way they do things. So, maybe someone that isn't afraid to use his closer on the road in the ninth inning, that kind of thing. Maybe, obviously someone that is not going to bat someone like Freddie Galvis towards the top of the lineup, someone that understands, analytics. So, yeah, I tend to think it'll be a younger hire.
With that being said, this is a team that's, I don't know, what is their expectations? I find it to be in a very, like we talked about it earlier, Ryan, you could go down to spring training next year with your 8, potentially in place already, with all young players under 26, 27 years old. You could potentially have Hoskins, Kingery, Crawford, Franco, Williams, Herrera, Altair, and Alfaro. Are you okay with they okay with that going into next year?
Yeah, but you won't see Kingery on opening day. Kingery won't be up until later in the year because they'll get another full year of control over him if they wait until May to bring him up. So, but even still, Cesar Hernandez, I think he's 26. You're looking at an entire lineup that would be under 26, I believe. I forget how old Altair is, so you're looking at so that's a good thing. You want young kids, the talented players that you can build around. Kind of like some other years where we're like, okay, well, what do you upgrade on this roster? You have to be, maybe you trade some of those. You have enough offensive players that maybe you trade someone on the major league roster to go get pitching. So. Because that's the one thing that they do need. They have young pitching too, but the only one that you could feel really good and confident about is Aaron Nola, and you should feel really good and confident about him because he had a really, really good year. But it's going to take more than one starting pitcher for this team to kind of take that next step.
Ryan, if the Phillies do trade some of the guys, who do you think are the prime trade targets?
You mean for the Phillies to trade away?
Right,
or
to trade away. Because Mike Gill and I talked about Galvis and Cesar Hernandez being good players, but are they attractive enough pieces then to bring some starting pitching back?
Yeah, that's kind of the question, and it's a good one because, we all know what Freddie Galvis can do. We know that he's one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball, but we also know that his offense leaves a lot to be desired. And granted, he's improved a little bit, but still, he's a below-average offensive player. And, that's probably not going to net you a whole lot, especially only has a year left. So, you'd have to find, the perfect fit there, a team that's just looking for a defensive shortstop. Cesar Hernandez is another one. But then you have to consider yourself, well, maybe, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So maybe there's a team that really, really likes Scott Kingery. And then maybe you have to say to yourself, well, if we want to go get a legit number one starting pitcher, and the package is going to have to be led by someone like Kingery, maybe you have to consider that. I'm not saying that that's what they should do. I'm just saying that you have to consider all avenues to upgrade your roster. I'm sure that they would, look to trade Cesar before Kingery and look to trade, say, Michael Franco before, and I don't think they're going to trade Franco. They still have 4 years of control over him, so they can give it another year to see if this clicks for him. But I'm just saying you have to consider all options. And like you said, you're not going to trade the 3 guys you like least on the roster and get a legitimate number one. It's not like you can combine Freddie Galvis, Tommy Joseph, and Jake Thompson and think you're going to go get, Chris Archer. This is not the way these work.
Now, Andy McPhail did also indicate today they'd consider moving prospects since they feel so deep with prospects in the organization. But I guess the challenge is to identify which prospects are attractive and which ones you want to hold on to. It's hard to pick which guys are going to pan out, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's just the thing with prospects. And kind of getting back to Kingery and Franco, everybody 3 years ago thought that Franco was going to be all-star caliber player. I think Mike Schmidt even said MVP caliber, and, that obviously hasn't come to fruition. And, got a Kingery, we don't know. He's close to the big leagues. He looks like he's going to be an impact player. We don't know. Then the further you get away, though, from the big leagues, guys are even more uncertain. I mean, we all love Sixto Sanchez. We don't know what he's going to be. He's 19. He could get hurt. A lot of things can happen. And not just Sixto, but any of those young pitchers. And they have a lot of them, a lot of talented pitching in A-ball, and some of them got to Double-A last year, too. But, yeah, I mean, that's just the thing. So sometimes you have to consider selling high. I mean, look at a lot of the big trades that this team was involved in the last decade. Trading for Roy Halladay, trading Cliff Lee away a few different times, the trades to both get Cliff Lee and to trade him away. You probably couldn't name a whole lot of those prospects in those trades, right? I mean, Carlos Carrasco has become a really good player. Jay Happ, I get, is a major league pitcher. But beyond that, look at those guys that they traded away for Halladay. Arnell doesn't really move the needle. Kyle Drabeck, great example. The pitching is just very uncertain and very fragile. So, yeah, I think you do consider trading from prospects to get proven big leaguers because more often than not, the big leaguer is going to be it's going to be the better move 5 years down the road.
Ryan, and we're talking with Ryan Lawrence, who covers the Phillies, longtime Phillies beat writer, PhillyVoice.com. Been around this team through the good times, the bad, and hopefully on the way back up here. And do you think 2018 is kind of a show me for these young guys? Like, we're going to give you the year to figure out which of you guys can play and then make our plan for 2019 offseason.
Yeah, but you know what? I think the last 2 years have been that too. And granted, some other players have joined the party with, Crawford and Alfaro and Hoskins and Williams all getting here. But that's what the last few years have been for Franco and for Hernandez so I mean that's just a part of the rebuild. Is you're giving these guys as long as you feel is right to see if they can be a part of this thing going forward, and it's kind of a fact-finding mission every year. But eventually, you have to turn that. Turn around and go the other direction and think, okay, we got to add to this and we got to try to contend now. But yeah, they might not be as close as some people would think after the last 2 months. In the last 2 months, they were a good team. They were a 500 team in the last 2 months of the season. But yeah, so I still think, and it's a combination of things. It's also just the marketplace this winter. It's not advantageous to upgrading your roster. The free agent market, it's okay. It's not great. Where I think the following year, is that crazy historic free agent class. So the timing might work out really well there. Where next year we're going to know what Aaron Altera is a little bit more. We're going to know what Nick Williams is a little bit more. We're going to know what J.P. Crawford is. And then, yeah, if you're one legit superstar away, and they might do it anyway, but, go all hands on deck for Manny Machado or Bryce Harper. Trade some of the surplus players for pitching, because that's the thing. They don't have to trade these guys this year. They can go into this year with Cesar Hernandez and Freddie Galvis and J.P. Crawford and Scott Kingery. It's a lot of guys, but the Cubs had a lot of guys last year, and sometimes it's good to have depth. And it doesn't mean that you can't make a same trade, say next summer, for a pitcher. So yeah, I think that 18 is going to be a lot like the last 2 years. There's just more guys you're evaluating.
Hey, the pitchers that are in the current system, I mean, there have been a lot of young guys, and those were the guys we were excited about. There's all these young pitchers that kept getting back in a trade, Eflin and Eichhoff and, right. The names of all these guys that we've seen in Lively and Pavetta,
Thompson,
Jake, yeah. Any of them excite you?
Velasquez is another one. Yeah, I mean, then that's kind of the thing. I mean, it's good to have depth with pitching, but, you're going to need more than one top-of-the-rotation guy. And again, the Phillies won a World Series in 2008. The bullpen was more of the pitching staff strength. They had Cole Hamels, but, I don't want to undersell what Jamie Moyer was. It was just a consistent pitcher that you can kind of rely on. Brett Myers was fine, even though he did get sent down to AAA that year because he was going through some stuff. So, I mean, that just goes to show you don't need a rotation of aces. But on the other side, you do need more than a rotations of 4s and 5s. And, I don't want to undersell Eichhoff and Velasquez and Pivetta, but, from what we've seen so far, I mean, they're just very unproven. We don't know what they're going to be. So I think if you were going into next year feeling that you want to be competitive, you're going to need more than that. But yeah, I mean, I think that the ceiling on some of the prospects a little lower, some of the pitching prospects, I think that's a little higher than a guy like Lively or a guy like Pivetta. I think that Franklin Colome and obviously Sixto Sanchez and Adonis Medina, I think that those guys probably have better arms than some guys that are in the big leagues right now. But that said, they still have a couple more ladders to climb, not ladders, but rungs to climb on the ladder before we can say for sure that they're, number 3 or number 2 type starters.
Okay, I know there's been a couple of names kind of thrown out there that the Phillies manager, I want to kind of get back to that a little bit because I think that will kind of set the tone of what kind of team this will be. Any of the names interest you? Do you have a couple names that interest you?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a story on Saturday where I put together a list of 12 names, which granted is a lot of names, but, I think what we saw when they did the Charlie Manuel search is that they did look at a lot of different names. Granted, it was a couple different front offices ago, but I still think it'll be a similar plan of attack by Matt Klentak because I think that he will interview many candidates. I mean, Brad Ausmus makes some logical sense. He's, not, old, but he's not young. He's kind of in the middle there. I think he's right around 50 maybe. He's a Dartmouth grad, which is where Matt Klentak went to school. So he's an Ivy League guy. He does have some managerial experience, so he's not a guy that, people are going to say, well, what are you hiring a guy that's never been a manager before? Kind of like the Doug Peterson line of thinking. So I think that's a name. There's some assistants. There's Alex Cora with Houston Astros. I think he's their bench coach. I know that he's a bit of a hot name because both the Tigers and Mets are also looking for managers. A name that I like was Gabe Kapler. He finished runner-up for the Dodgers managing job a couple years ago when Dave Roberts got the job, and they liked him so much that they put him in the front office. Now, I don't know that he would be a guy that wants to be a manager. If he likes it, he's from L.A., he's working for the Dodgers front office. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe this is fine with him, and he sees himself more in a front office trajectory. But he did interview for a managing job not that long ago, and he is a analytically minded baseball guy, which again I think would fall kind of in line with his front office. So I think that's an interesting name, just a different one that you probably haven't heard. Raul Bañez is interesting. He interviewed for the the Tampa Bay Rays job. I think it was 2 or 3 winters ago. So obviously he has a connection here to the Phillies. So yeah, those are some names. There's probably a couple others that, Dusty Wathan, he's someone that the organization obviously likes. They promoted him last year from AA to AAA. He was the all-time winningest manager for the Reading Fightin' Phils. Organization's been around for a while. I think he'll definitely get an interview. So, those are some of the names that you'll hear from. But, I don't know if we're only a couple days into this. I'm not sure we're going to get down to a list of 2 or 3 just yet.
Ryan Lawrence with us, and yeah, Dusty Wathan was the guy I was going to ask you about. By the way, Brad Ausmus is 48. I looked that up earlier when I was asking Mike Gill whether or not the new Phillies manager would be under 50. I said real or not real, and he said real because they're trying to go in that analytical sort of way like you're talking about. But
everybody's trying to outdo everybody by finding the youngest guy they can find now. That's the new game.
Right, throw the
Who's the youngest guy you can find?
Right, and let him grow with it.
Chase Utley's 38, so he was on my list. Obviously, he's still playing.
Silver Fox. Hey, a guy that's not 38, he's a little older, but I want to ask you about Larry Boa. Does he have a future with this ball club?
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, there are reports that, he already kind of has a standing offer as a instructor, minor league instructor, and I think he likes working with young players, so maybe that'll be something that he is interested in. But yeah, it remains to be seen. I mean, here's a guy that's probably, I don't know if as accomplished is the right word, but I mean, yeah, probably is as accomplished as anybody that's ever come through this organization because they've only won 2 World Series. So he has a World Series ring. That makes him as accomplished as most people that's come through this organization. But yeah, I just didn't want to sell him short. This is a guy that's done a lot in this organization that has worn the uniform, I think, more than anybody. I mean, you consider the playing career that he had here for as long as he was here. I think it was from 70 until 83. Then he came back as a coach under Jim Fregosi. Then he came back as a manager, and then he came back as a coach again. So I think they'll find a way to keep this guy. I think he would like to be on a major league coaching staff. That's kind of where he's, built his reputation in recent years, and is pretty popular with young players. I mean, he's a guy that used to, be criticized for being too hard on guys. But it's okay to be, someone that's teaching the game too. I mean, not, I think it's all personality thing. A lot of the Latin players love him. Like Freddie Galvis loves him. Cesar Hernandez, they all learned a lot from him. I think he'll be here one way or another. I think another interesting thing is I wouldn't mind hearing him in a broadcast booth. I mean, Larry has done some broadcasting. I think he worked for ESPN in between jobs at one point. Mm-hmm. I think that he would be terrific at that. Same with Phoenix, to be honest with you. I think both of those guys would be terrific in either a radio or TV setting with the Phillies.
Hey, what did you I'm going to get your take on the way the whole Pete thing went down and just the way they handled it. Do you think it was the right move to move on? I mean, it seems that was just like we made a move just because it was the time for me to pick my own guy. Like that's kind of the way it seems. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I initially had, I don't want to say a problem. I mean, that sounds a little bit too strong, but I mean, we were all kind of shocked by it, I would say. I mean, then again, 2 weeks ago, and I think when I was in New York and we were talking about it, I said I wouldn't really count out anything. I mean, if you're going to lose 96 to 100 games somewhere in that range, and you're going to be in contention for one of the worst records in baseball, you're not safe. But he was given an extension in May, and I think the thing that really stuck in my craw were the words that were spoken by Matt Klentak when he gave him the extension. He went all out of his way to say, Pete is our guy. This isn't a short-term thing. I have all the confidence in the world that he can lead us in the next direction. And then it's just like, wait, what? So, yeah, I mean, I think eventually, yes, Klentak was going to hire his own guy. But the way they handled it probably wasn't the best, although I do get it, too, because you don't want to have a lame duck manager in a clubhouse either, because then the players can kind of do what they want, and you lose a little bit of your the hammer, I guess, as a manager. So, from that standpoint, I get it. But yeah, I don't know if it was handled perfectly. But then again, a lot of new front offices are going to bring in their own people, just like in any walk of life.
Right.
New management's going to come in and want their own people. But it was once upon a time that Pat Gillick came in, and Charlie Manuel wasn't his guy, but he just did stick with Charlie Manuel, and it worked out okay. So, you don't always have to bring in your own guy to have success.
In your tenure covering this team, how different is the organization run now than it was 2 years ago?
Wow, that's a good question. I would tend to say a lot for just the fact that they've introduced analytics. I mean, they can't. It's you wouldn't think they would want to admit to it so loudly, but like every chance they get, every time you hear from McPhail or you hear from John Middleton, they like to remind you there was only one person that dealt with analytics in this organization, 2.5 years ago? Mm-hmm. And now there's 14, and they want to, as McPhail said today, they want to bolster that. So, yeah, I would just say from that standpoint, looking at analytics, looking at sports science, looking at all these different, avenues to improve and upkeep your roster, aside from the traditional way, I would say, yeah. I mean, I would say that it is. The organization's run differently. That said, there are still a lot of the same people in the organization. A lot of front office people are still here. So, yeah, they've changed, but I don't think they've really lost the who they are, type of thing either. They're just a more evolved organization, I guess the best way to put it.
Ryan Lawrence with us here, covers the Phillies, PhillyVoice.com. This offseason, do they go into this offseason, I should say, thinking that there's a guy on this team to build around? Like Rhys Hoskins, Nick Williams, anybody at all?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that, because I remember when the whole Odubel Herrera thing and people were like, oh, you can't build around a guy like this. Well, I'm not sure there necessarily has to be a guy or one guy. I mean, if you have just that collection and you have that core, group of players. I mean, again, we go back to the '08, and it's kind of the perfect thing the perfect example. But and it's hard to believe you're ever going to have the best players at second base and shortstop and first base in the history of the franchise all on the roster at the same time. That was a unique situation. But even still, to have a couple guys, 2 or 3 guys. So, yeah, I mean, you hope that you could build around Hoskins and Crawford. That would be great. Well, I don't know what those guys are going to be 4 years down the road, so I don't want to put too much pressure on them. I tend to think that, yeah, you want to build around this core, but I don't think this is going to be it. I think they're going to go get a legit superstar-type player next winter. Not this winter, but next winter. Because I think, Manny Machado, Bryce Harper are both not old. I think they're both 24, 25?
Yeah.
When they hit the open market, they're going to be still young. I think they're going to be around 25, 26. So, to me, the player you build around might not be here yet.
All right. I'll ask you this as we leave here, Ryan. Something that you would like to see them do this offseason. What's top on your list?
Go get another pitcher. I mean, and I'm not saying you have to go get the best guy available, but, I think I would just – I remember last year I wanted to see them go get a hitter. I was on the Jose Bautista train, shows what I know because he didn't have great of a year. But I just wanted to see someone that would bring some excitement back to the ballpark, and that guy was exciting, if nothing else, for when he was in his peak. And but no, they had some hitters that came. I mean, Rhys Hoskins really filled the bill and did that for the final 2 months of the season. So yeah, to flip that around, I would say I need another pitcher. Really, Aaron Nola gave you a chance to win every 5 days, and not only that, but he was really good. He gave you more than a chance. You felt like you were going to win when he took the mound. They need another guy like that. And I think the route to do that will probably be through a trade. Granted, everybody in baseball wants that. They want young, controllable pitching. But if you put your best foot forward and you make a trade, and it might be a trade that you're uncomfortable with, and sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to give something to get something. If you want to go get a young pitcher that's under club control, a Garrett Cole or a Chris Archer or a Julio Teheran, you're going to have to give up something to get them. So that would be my wish list, to go get a pitcher like that.
Ryan Lawrence, everybody here. The Phillies have a very interesting offseason ahead of them, starting with finding a manager, and they said they want to do that. McPhail indicated today by the winter meeting. So
GM meetings, actually.
GM meetings.
Before the GM meetings, which is a month from now, second week of November. Yep.
So we'll obviously be keeping an eye on that. At Ryan Lawrence 21 over at PhillyVoice.com is where you can read his Philadelphia Phillies offseason coverage. Thanks, pal.
All right, Mike Pete. Hey, keep rooting on my Clemson Tigers, too, all right?
We'll take care of you. I'll take care of that.
He's got his purple shirt on today. Purple and the orange Mike flag.
Yeah, but my niece
look
goes to Clemson, so we're good to go.
I'll be there Saturday.
Attaboy.
Nice, man.
Go Tigers.
Take care. It's Ryan Lawrence covering the Phillies here